Tripti
Our
Di,
next,
I have already been
our next
introduced. I have
speaker
already been
is the
introduced. So,
right one and the only dynamic lady of the Raipur Obstetric and Gynec Society, the Dr. Asha Jain. And though the things have already been spoken about her by the organizer, but however, she is a state coordinator for FOXY President 2021 for 8 cancer camp programs. She is elected member of the Chhattisgarh Medical Council 2020 to 2024, that is for 5 years. President Raipur Obstetric and Gynec Society for last 2 years, and she is the organizing chairperson of Happy Gynecon 2019. She is that is the annual conference of the Society of Vaginal Surgeons of India and AOGCG 2019. She is the secretary of the Raipur Obstetric and Gynec Society for past 6 years. She is the member of the FOXY Public Awareness Committee from 2019 for 2 years. FOXY Gynecological Oncologist Committee 2018 till date. And she is the first trained colposcopist of Chhattisgarh since March 2000. And more than 300 public awareness, health and the cancer prevention activities. She had many articles in newspapers, TVs, and radio programs on women health. And she has contributed to WHO research project for HPV genotyping of the cervical cancers in central India. So I welcome Dr. Asha, and please start with your own lecture. It's over to Dr.
Didi.
Asha.
Thank you, Di. And please allow me screen sharing. Mr. Abhijit, I need to screen share. Thank you.
You can share your screen, no issues.
So thank you, Tripti Di, for such a nice introduction. And in between the breast, we talk a little of the uterus, because the uterus gives us an opportunity to actually look at the breast. So we are talking today of ormeloxifene, and we will be discussing its role in abnormal uterine bleeding. I know you are an avid user of this drug, and I would really welcome your input after my lecture. So, abnormal uterine bleeding. What is abnormal uterine bleeding? We all know that now the terminology has changed. It is the changes in menstruation resulting from increased volume, duration, or frequency. And when we see our OPDs, 5 to 10% of the cases that come to us in our OPD come with AUB. This heavy menstrual bleeding or an irregular menstrual bleeding, intermenstrual bleeding, it negatively affects the physical, emotional, sexual, and professional aspects of women. Menstrual disorders affect across the lifespan, means right from menarche, during childbearing age, and up to the menopause. And if she bleeds for some reason before menarche or after menopause. So abnormal uterine bleeding remains abnormal and is a great cause of worry to us. What is the epidemiology? 5 to 10% cases in the outpatient setting. The estimated worldwide prevalence of subjective self-defined abnormal uterine bleeding varies. It varies from 4% to 52%. And in India, the prevalence is about 17.9%. But what we are talking about is self-reported, because as such, we do not have exact data for our country. We all know this FIGO nomenclature 2011 on abnormal uterine bleeding. It is heavy menstrual bleeding, AUB, HMB. Intermenstrual bleeding, AUB, IMB. And then there are the Palm-Cohen classification. So this is basically AUB with an added term which is PAM or COIN. PAM is the structural causes and COIN is the non-structural causes. So what we previously used to say that DUB is when you find nothing wrong structurally. That now has gone into non-structural causes. And PAM is where we used to name the cause. Now that has also been included in abnormal uterine bleeding. So it is always AUB, P is polyp, A is adenomyosis, L is leiomyoma, LSM is submucous myoma, any other myoma is LO, and malignancy and hyperplasia is M. PALLM. And then COIN are non-structural causes. So C stands for coagulopathy, O is ovulatory dysfunction, endometrial causes, iatrogenic causes, and what is not yet classified is N. So this is the classification. And when we study this, this is a diagrammatic view of the same, the PAM COIN classification. When we come to midlife or the perimenopause, then there can be ovulatory bleeding even in the midlife and perimenopause. Ovulatory AUB is ovulatory bleeding may be heavy and can be associated with typical premenstrual symptoms and painful periods. These women will, when you do an endometrial biopsy, you get a secretory phase, and in spite of that, the bleeding is heavy. Then the other is the anovulatory AUB. Anovulatory bleeding, which is found more frequently during perimenopause compared to premenopause, is often linked to prolonged periods, heavier flow, and an irregular cycle. If this is prolonged, then anovulatory bleeding has a stronger link to endometrial cancer and endometrial hyperplasia, which we know are hyperestrogenic states. So there is either more of estrogen or there is an abnormal response to estrogen that leads to hyperplasia and endometrial cancer. What is the etiology? There could be hormonal changes. There could be benign anatomical changes like the polyp, fibroid adenomyosis. There could be low thyroid function, hypothyroidism. There could be a coagulopathy or cancer. That is, endometrial is more common, but you can have an abnormal bleeding associated with cervical cancer as well. Many patients with postmenopausal bleeding or prolonged bleeding where they cannot diagnose that they have menstruation or not, they usually turn out cervical in our area. Then the goal of diagnosis is to distinguish women with anatomical causes from women with normal anatomy. So this is what we do for a diagnosis. Identifying endometrial malignancy, although uncommon among the AUB etiologies, is often the main purpose of the investigations. All of it is to rule out endometrial carcinoma or atypical endometrium or cancer cervix or CIN 2 to 3. So this is what we are going to look for. How do you assess it? There is a general assessment, history and the bleeding pattern, then the physical examination, pelvic examination, and speculum examination. This is a request to my friends and colleagues that please always examine a woman when she comes to you, even with bleeding. Because you might just write tranexamic acid that when bleeding comes, I will examine her. And maybe there is a polyp that is protruding out of the cervix, which is bleeding will not stop. Or it is a malignancy that is bleeding. So we need to really have a look of anything that can easily be seen, even when the patient turns up with bleeding. Then we have to do lab tests. So lab tests are basically for degree of anemia and cause of anemia, and if there is any hemoglobinopathy or a coagulation disorder. And evaluate pelvic organs and the endometrium by an ultrasound, by a hysteroscopy or MRI if indicated. But an ultrasound is definitely a must after a speculum examination. A speculum examination cannot be replaced by a transvaginal sonography. You have to do an examination first and then proceed with the sonography. What is the approach in AUB management? The management of AUBL should address fertility desire, impact of pressure symptoms when it is due to a fibroid, comorbidities, and any other AUB contributors. Treatment has to be individualized. There's no one size fit all approach. So, whether it is initial treatment or it is later treatment, one size doesn't fit all. You need to individualize the treatment. And in those with other underlying causes, such as fibroids, then you need to treat the cause. Just treating the bleeding will not help. So, what are the treatment? Can't see my heading. Treatment goals are: one is the regulation of menstrual cycle, second is minimization of blood loss, and the third is improvement in the quality of life. So actually they don't come one after one, they are all together. That if her menstruation is controlled, there will be less blood loss and her quality of life will automatically improve. Now, when a woman comes to you, she is 40 plus. Many a time the mind runs immediately. Na rahega baans, na bajegi bansuri. Take out the uterus and everything is free. So hysterectomy remains as the only suitable definitive therapy for those who have no further fertility concerns. But the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology recommends that you have to start with medical management before resorting to surgical interventions, because you cannot opt for surgery as the first option. Medical treatment, this is the whole galaxy, the whole bouquet that you have. You have hormones, you have receptor modulators, antifibrinolytics, NSAIDs, and maybe radiotherapy. So what are the hormones? Estrogen and progesterone combined pills, progestogens, then the intrauterine system with levonorgestrel, then GnRH, antagonist, estrogen, then the progesterone receptor modulators, which are the ulipristal acetate, then the selective estrogen receptor modulators like ormeloxifene, antifibrinolytics, tranexamic acid, which we are all using at the first line, NSAIDs, mefenamic acid, naproxen, ibuprofen, aspirin. Now, each one of these has a specific side effect. Mefenamic acid causes severe gastritis. Naproxen causes angina in a patient who's beyond 50 years of age. Ibuprofen may precipitate asthma, and aspirin, though it is very safe, again you have to think about gastritis and coagulation profile changes. So these are the drugs that are available to you that you're going to be able to give to a patient. As we discussed in our last CME, ulipristal now, because of the liver toxicity, is not indicated for long-term use. So now you just keep that out. We now discuss what we have planned to discuss for today, that is ormeloxifene. Now, when you give this patient, a patient with normal menstruation ormeloxifene, then, and you have given it because of her breast complaints, as discussed by Dr. Ramani before, you are giving 30 milligram alternate day, 12 weeks, and the patient might come to you with amenorrhea or very, very scanty menstruation. So this is actually telling you that this drug causes decrease in the bleeding. Madam has already discussed it, that the mechanism of action is two-way. It blocks the action of estrogen by preventing binding of estrogen to its receptor, and it decreases the expression of estrogen receptors. So first thing is it will not allow estrogen to go there, and the second thing is the receptors are blocked and new receptors are not formed. Ultimately prevents the proliferation of endometrium. This is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. It interacts with estrogen receptor, eliciting tissue-specific responses. It is effective and safe in the treatment of abnormal uterine bleeding at all ages. So here you can see it is effective on the endometrium, breast, vagina, bone, liver, CVS, and central nervous system. Whereas all others are effective on something and maybe not so effective on something else. What is the dosage? The dosage for the breast is 30 milligram alternate day, but here the dosage is different. It is helpful in both anovulatory and ovulatory abnormal bleeding. The dosage is 60 milligram tablet twice a week for 12 weeks. Subsequently, you can give it 60 milligram tablet once a week for the next 12 weeks. So what we have is a 6-month period of treatment. But do the problems go away after 6 months? I have a question right now. How long can this be used? So we have studies up to 14 years of use. So it is safe even when it is used for a very, very long time, up to 14 years. What is the evaluation of treatment based on hemoglobin level and endometrial response? HB levels at 0 months and 6 months, and then something went wrong with this slide. So 0 months and 6 months, and then on the endometrium thickness at 0 months and 6 months. You can see that the hemoglobin went from 9.7 to 11.07, and endometrium, which was at 8.56, came down to 3.6. So this is a very, very significant change that you can see when you give the drug. Subjective improvement, 0% said there's no improvement. About 7% said there is mild improvement. 90% said there is marked improvement, and 3.5% said that their symptoms have increased. So, when you explain to the patient, when you're writing the medicine, you need to explain that it is effective in 95%, more than 95%, but there are still 3-4% people on whom it might not have an effect, or it may really cause an increase in symptoms. Now there is the other parameter, that is the P-BAC score. Pre-treatment 100 to 284 women, and post-treatment it was less than 80 in 83 women. Percentage of women with mild anemia was 95% in the pre-treatment period, which went down to only 18% after treatment. So there's a great response when it is given, even by subjective methods. So what is this? What is P-BAC? P-BAC scoring is a personalized bleeding score. So how is it explained to the patient? How do you give that? 1 point for an eachly lightly stained pad, 5 points for moderately stained, and 20 points for a completely saturated. When it's a tampon, then lightly stained, moderately stained, and then completely saturated. And then clots are flooding. When it's a 5-cent coin, which is like our 5 rupee coin, 1 point. If it is bigger than that, it is 5 points. And whenever there is flooding, it is another 5 points. So the bleeding in the whole cycle is personally calculated according to this P-BAC score, and then the points are added up. And that is how we came back to this study. That if the pre-treatment, the P-BAC score was 100 to 200, it came to less than 80 in 83 women out of 84. Depiction of change in endometrial thickness. This is the same chart that shows that there is a reduction in the endometrial thickness. 440 women with menorrhagia. Or meloxifene was given 60 milligram twice a week for 3 months, then 60 milligram once a week for 1 month. In group A. In group B, it was medroxyprogesterone acetate, 10 milligram twice a day from day 5 to day 25 of the cycle. And what you can see is that the pre-treatment MPA group, if it was 300, post-treatment it went to 75. Treatment 365, post-treatment 75. Endometrial thickness also similarly decreased. So there is not much of a difference in both of them, but the dosage for ormeloxifene is easier to use. This is another study in which they have used oral contraceptive. And again, you see there is no statistically significant difference between the oral contraceptive pill and the ormeloxifene group after 6 months, after 3 months. What is the patient satisfaction with the treatment? Highly satisfied, satisfied, and poorly satisfied. So you will see in both groups, it is almost the same. Though in the ormeloxifene group, the percentage of highly satisfied and satisfied is slightly higher. So ormeloxifene was effective in treating dysfunctional uterine bleeding or abnormal uterine bleeding in almost all aspects and can be considered as a non-steroidal option of therapy. It is suitable for perimenopausal women, adolescents, and those women who wish to preserve their fertility. This is another study where only 50 women between 25 to 45 years with abnormal uterine bleeding because of fibroids was taken. The same dose, ormeloxifene 60 milligram twice a week, or ethinyl estradiol 30 microgram with desogestrel 150 microgram, day 1 to 21 for 6 months. In the OCP group, 43.8% reported reduction in bleeding, whereas in the ormeloxifene group, 81% reported this. Mean pBAC score in non-hemorrhagic range at 6 months, only 8% in the OCP group and 72% in the ormeloxifene group. So what does this tell you? That it is a good option for medical management of AOB even by fibroids for symptom relief. It is not a drug for size reduction. So even though the bleeding will reduce, the size of the tumors will not reduce. What is the effectiveness? It is an optimally designed selective estrogen receptor modulator indicated for the treatment of abnormal uterine bleeding at any age. It reduces menstrual blood loss by up to 80%. Because of anti-estrogenic action on endometrium, it normalizes the endometrial thickness because of prolonged unopposed estrogen. The common side effects are like what we learned in pharmacology for everything: nausea, vomiting, dizziness. It is non-teratogenic, which is very important to remember. And chronic use up to 4 years has shown no evidence of common serious side effects and no serious ovarian pathology. What is the safety? It is primarily used for contraception as once a week pill. It is also found effective in the management of other gynec problems. There are concerns about Cencroman for having been associated with increased risk of uterine prolapse and urinary incontinence. However, these have not been proved substantially, even in patients who have been on prolonged medication with Cencroman for more than 15 years. But I will tell you that every organ in a woman's body is responsive to estrogen and progesterone. So when her connective tissue, her pelvic tissue, everything is responsive to estrogen, and you're going to decrease that estrogen, then the aging effect, the decrease in the strength of the connective tissue might happen. So it is always better to advise her Kegels exercises, to advise her pelvic strengthening exercises whenever you are advising a woman of this age, a perimenopausal woman or a midlife woman, for heavy menstrual bleeding. It will lead to overall health of her body as well. So with this, I conclude my session. I hope you have had some takeaway, and I thank you for a very, very patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you so much for the very nice lecture. And this is really very good to listen about the ormiloxifene. It was long back
भरीत
that,
करतो का भरीत?
pardon,
वांग्याचं भरीत आणि
it was very long back that we had used it over 100 patients and conducted one thesis research work. When we have found that ormiloxy really did very well, extremely well, though study was conducted for a period of 6 months. However, most of the patients, they responded very well. But afterwards, we had found that some of the patients, they came back with a heavy menstrual bleeding because of, and there was endometrial hyperplasia. So that was the only observation which had which was bothering to us. Otherwise, this was a very good drug, and most of the patients, they were very well satisfied.
That has been my experience as well, madam. That is why you need to, continue it. You cannot stop it. When it is being given as a contraceptive, it is taken for 5 years, 6 years at a stretch. So if the patient has a problem, that problem will not go away until she attains menopause. And the safety is well proved. So I think we should not stop it. And personally, I would never give any medicine unless I have an endometrial biopsy report in my hand that says that there is nothing serious. So if the woman is 35 plus and she's come with heavy bleeding, I would prefer to do a DNC and an endometrial biopsy to know what is wrong. So
Exactly, all the patients of DUB, they should first priorly investigated, followed by the treatment. What I was suggesting, I was saying was that after stoppage of the therapy, when they were perfectly good and in good conditions, they had stopped, and later on, it had been found out that some of the patients, they had developed endometrial. That's what I want to say. Anyway, thank you so much. Very nice presentation.
thank you. Thank you.